Seriously, what's up with Russia? Why do the United States and Western countries have to band together to send both money and weapons, attacking Russia with both military and financial warfare to such an extreme degree? Up to now, Russia has set a new record as the most heavily and severely sanctioned country in world history. But apparently, that's still not enough, because the United States has ramped up sanctions against Russia even further, imposing secondary sanctions. That means anyone who does business with Russia will have their money seized by the US. So what exactly does Russia have? Thank you to everyone who follows the Sai Money Monster channel. And if anyone is interested in supporting our channel, helping me write great content and tell engaging stories like this, as well as supporting the awesome team that helps make these cool videos, you can support us right here, or you can simply like, share, or subscribe to our channel. Thank you. So what does Russia have? The first thing is, Russia has Vladimir Putin. He's a very confident leader. Putin himself has come out and said that the recent escalation of attacks from Europe, which has been sending weapons, is nothing compared to Russia. If you compare Europe and Russia, it's like Europe is defenseless. There's nothing to protect them. Why is he so bold to say that? Well, let's start with this. Russia is the country with the most powerful nuclear warheads in the world. Russia has a total of 5,889 nuclear warheads. At least, that's what's been reported. One of these warheads, called the Tsar Bomba, has an explosive yield of up to 100,000 kilotons. This is the most destructive weapon ever recorded in human history. Let's take a look at some footage comparing the size of the Tsar Bomba. As for Russia, there are two versions of the Tsar Bomba. The first version is the Tsar Bomba with an explosive yield of 50,000 kilotons, which was tested in 1961. In this footage, you can see a comparison between the 50,000 kiloton Tsar Bomba and Little Boy, the bomb that the United States dropped on Hiroshima. That tiny bomb you see here killed 70,000 people instantly, and another 70,000 died later as a result. So in total, Little Boy caused the deaths of about 140,000 people. The next bomb is the Tsar Bomba, with a yield of 100,000 kilotons. This bomb was never tested though. They just said it was too big to actually deploy. If it were ever used, it would require a pilot to deliver and drop it, and whoever that pilot was who took it to drop the bomb, even the person who dropped it would die right there as well. Now, let's take a look at real footage of the Tsar Bomba with a yield of 50,000 kilotons, which was tested back in 1961. Jump up, 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 up. In recent developments, the United States has officially granted permission for Ukraine to escalate the use of advanced European weaponry to attack Russia. President Vladimir Putin was visibly incensed and stated at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum that if anyone thinks that European countries can send weapons into the war zone to help Ukraine attack, if Russia's territory is attacked, causing this significant amount of trouble, then we, or Russia, should also have the right to send weapons of the same level to other countries that are either striking, protesting, or deeply dissatisfied with Western nations, so they can use our weapons to attack the West. Basically, this means that if America and Europe provide advanced weaponry to Ukraine specifically to attack Russia, then Russia should also be able to send Russian weapons to countries that want to attack Europe, right? That would be total chaos. So why is Putin suddenly getting so angry about this now? After all, the United States and Europe have been sending weapons to help Ukraine for a long time already. It's because things have escalated. The United States just recently gave the green light for Ukraine to use, listen carefully, European weapons to launch long-range strikes into Russia. So Putin said, in that case, maybe I should send weapons to other countries that want to attack Europe too. But he didn't specify which countries those would be. He just mentioned that the long-range weapons being fired into Russia are made in Germany. And when they say the United States gave the green light, it was a rather unusual kind of approval. They allowed Ukraine to use weapons that were sent from Europe. to launch long-range attacks into Russia. But if the weapons are from the United States, their use is restricted to certain targets only. Or maybe Biden is thinking, well, just in case one day we need to make up with Russia, we can say, hey, those warheads that were fired into your country, they weren't American, they were European. You can check the warheads and see where they were made. At that point, if Europe sees things that way, if that day really comes, Europe would probably be singing this song to America. You are not being sincere at all. We do not mean anything to you. Anyway, moving on with the news. What else does Russia have that the West doesn't like? Russia has a massive abundance of natural resources. They have resources, whether it's oil, natural gas, or LNG, which they can produce at the third highest volume in the world. That makes it not only a major source of income, but also a tool for economic negotiation with the rest of the world, because Russia can cooperate with OPEC Plus to set oil prices. And that's not even counting the oil resources under the polar ice in Antarctica, which Russian exploration ships are already heading out to survey. And they found that there are hundreds of millions of tons of oil beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. And besides having a lot of oil, Russia is definitely one of the countries blessed by God, because not only do they have oil, but they also have an abundance of food as well. Russia has enough food to actually use it as a weapon of war, exporting hunger to the world's population. Looking at the USDA chart, it shows that Russia exports the most grain in the world, holding the #1 market share at 24%. That's a lot more than the second place, which is Europe, with only 16%. That's quite a big difference, because Russia's food production costs are much lower than in Europe. Over the past year, Russia has been able to produce up to 91 million tons of grain and export as much as 51 million tons. Anyone who can control a quarter of the world's food supply will, of course, have significant economic bargaining power globally. That's why Russia is one of the key players holding a major share of the global grain market. That's why even if Europe wants to sanction Russia, there's one thing Europe simply can't sanction. All they can do is raise import tariffs a bit, and that is grains or food products from Russia. There's just no way Europe could sanction Russian food without risking its own people going hungry. Every year, Russia exports grains, like oilseeds and other cereals, to Europe worth up to 1.3 billion euros. That's the figure for 2023. So Russia is one of the BRICS countries that encourages everyone in the group, especially those who can produce food and commodities within BRICS, to not have to trade commodities or goods through US exchanges like COMEX. Instead, they can trade directly within BRICS, so the Western world doesn't have to know about our transactions anymore. The last point of this clip, many people probably want to know, does this mean that all the sanctions and boycotts from European countries against Russia have failed? Has the Russian economy, since the start of the war, since the sanctions, since their assets were seized, has it not gotten worse at all? In fact, more money is coming in. Even the IMF has come out and predicted that Russia's GDP will grow by 3.2%, which is the highest among advanced economies. But really, after Russia has been sanctioned, boycotted, and attacked this much, can their economy actually keep doing well in a sustainable way? Can it keep going strong for a long time? There are people who have spoken about sanctions. For example, this person, sorry, I can't pronounce their name, a senior economist at PF Capital, explained the mechanism of sanctions. Of course, sanctions are meant to damage Russia's economic system, but it only disrupts Russia's economic system temporarily. It wouldn't be temporary if Russia couldn't adapt or handle the sanctions, but it will just be a short-term issue if Russia manages to cope with them. The destructive power of sanctions is really just about throwing things off balance, right? It's kind of like a germ or a virus entering our body. If our immune system is strong enough and we can adapt, we'll be able to fight off the sanctions or the virus that's entered our system. by itself and move forward, maybe even come out stronger than before if it finds a way to run its economy by avoiding the channels affected by sanctions. So can Russia do this? Yes, it can. And it's done it quickly, effectively, and pretty impressively. Take oil, for example, which used to be a major source of income for Russia. When Europe suddenly stopped buying, Russia turned to China and started selling to them instead, even offering a discount. The Group of Seven, by the way, once proposed a plan to pressure global oil prices to at $60 per barrel, so that Russia wouldn't be able to make huge profits from oil. But it didn't work, because if Russia teams up with OPEC+, they also have the power to set oil prices. Russia did join hands with OPEC+ and announced they would cut oil production, which drove prices up. Honestly, how could the G7 possibly keep oil at $60 per barrel? Now, the international community is more worried about the oil coming out of Russia. Will it come out smoothly? Will it flow? Because if Russian oil doesn't flow, like when Ukraine used drones to attack Russian oil refineries, it's hard for America to predict. If Russian oil doesn't flow smoothly, oil prices will go up even more, and inflation will hit every country around the world even harder. And when oil prices are high, it plays right into Russia's hands. Oil has become Russia's main source of income, and the #1 buyer of Russian oil is actually quite wealthy. That means China has become Russia's #1 customer, and now China is really under the spotlight, especially with the US ramping up sanctions this time. Like I said, China does business and trades with Russia, right? So now we have to see, after the first round of sanctions, which didn't seem to faze Russia much, whether this new, tougher round of sanctions, which now targets financial institutions and anyone doing business with Russia, will have an effect. We'll have to see if this'll really hit Russia hard, especially since their dollar feed is also being targeted. Is Russia struggling right now? Yes, they are, because many financial institutions have chosen to refuse to do business with Russia out of fear of the US's secondary sanctions. So we'll have to keep watching to see whether Russia's resources, like oil and food, will be enough for them to maintain their bargaining power in the global economy. Can they go any further than this? If Russia is completely isolated from the rest of the world, will they still be able to survive and thrive? Or, if the pressure becomes too intense, will the world's largest and most powerful nuclear arsenal be unleashed by Russia? And if so, against whom?